This is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Welcome back. We are at NAB Show Live, and we are broadcasting live from the MetaFX studio here in the grand lobby of Central Hall. And I'm Brian Sithurst. I'm the chief storyteller from Storytech Immersive, and I guess as far as we know today, I'm your VR guy. So our last segment, we talked a little bit about post-production. Right now we're going to talk about something called compute power. And the thing about VR is it's a lot of rendering, it's a lot of stitching, it's a lot of editing, and if you're on a slow machine or you don't have the capabilities, it's going to be a very, very painful process. And I've actually witnessed that very painful process and been part of it. So we have Ryan Cummins, who stayed on from our last panel.
Thanks for having me again.
From Legend 3D. He's the VR VFX supervisor. And we have Graham Sack. Graham is an independent filmmaker, most recently of Lincoln in the Bardo. And actually, just a little background, I produced a piece, as you probably know by now, called My Brother's Keeper. Time.com listed 5 VR pieces that you needed to watch. And one of those 5 was My Brother's Keeper, and one was Lincoln in the Bardo. And I went and watched Lincoln in the Bardo and went, oh my God, I gotta meet this guy. Because in my mind, there are so few great VR filmmakers emerging that when the content is there and it's really great, it's like, it's gotta be seen. And so, we're gonna talk about compute power. So I'm gonna start with you, Ryan.
Sure.
Define compute power as it relates to VR.
For us, it's
As a post-production,
it's
a little bit about Legend 3D.
It's all the facets, it's the storage capacity, because we're handling a lot more data from the cameras. It's the CPU power, being able to handle and process all of the editing and stitching. It's the GPU power to help accelerate some of those processes, or the rendering aspect. And then even just the networking, just to make sure that even when we have all these fast devices, that everything can get to all of our artists, supervisors, whoever it is in the building, as fast as possible, because of these short kind of crunch times and quicker turnaround times, that it's a multifaceted issue.
Well, and also putting out that file. I mean, just that final file, what you wait for. Well, first of all, the upload of everything in the beginning, of all the images, everything from the camera, everything you've shot. I mean, the speed of the connection, of course, but also the speed of the computers and stuff. And that can cripple you. You can wait 8 to 10 hours just to get started. And then it actually can almost get there, and then you have to start over again.
We definitely schedule a little bit of lead time of when we say, the edit lock is going to be on this day. We assume that something's going to happen either on the upload side from the client or on the download side on our end. So we say, if the edit's supposed to be locked Monday morning, we'll assume that we won't have the files in possession on our server to say maybe Wednesday. Not to say that we won't have a Monday night, overnight, and Tuesday morning, but there's so many issues that can arise with that much data that we just give ourselves as much of a lead time as possible, so that way if there is any hiccups, we're okay.
So Graham, with Lincoln in the Bardo, we have live action. There's CGI, there's virtual worlds that are being rendered by Otoy and Unreal 4, you have all that. Then what you did is actually a combination of live action and CGI and animation?
So what we did for Lincoln was we shot live action, both on location and then on green screen. And then we did very heavy VFX overlay on the green screen images, along with some level of animation, and composited them back into the environment. The other thing to know about the piece is it's 10 minutes long, but it feels like one continuous shot. So there are moments where we were overlaying as many as 100 separate pieces of video with the intention of creating a continuous feel. And that had a lot of implications in terms of the way that our VFX house, a plug for our VFX house, The Molecule, Chris Healer was our VFX supervisor, did an amazing job. But what was complicated about it was if you did this in a normal way, like rendering it out through Nuke, we had just baseline 36,000 frames for a 10-minute long film running at 60 frames per second. We were pushing it out at 8K because we wanted to future-proof it. We were delivering it out to the Times, and they may run that content, for years and years into the future.
This is what we were actually talking about earlier, which is creating at the highest level possible.
Yes.
So that you're actually future-proofing, because right now there's not a lot of money. I'm just adding this for the sake of our audience. Right now there's not a lot of money in VR, but the assets that are being created, they become part of a library of content that may have value in the future. So your investment now could actually pay off later, even though there's not a broad audience for VR, immersive VR quite yet.
That's exactly right. I mean, so I think the actual files that we were running as of today were 4K files, but we were pushing out as part of the production and post-process 8K files with the expectation that that's what's going to be shown a few years from now. And that has huge compute power implications as well. So just at a baseline, 36,000 frames at 8K, and then we had these very intensive compositing shots. We had there's one shot of the film where the viewer is surrounded by over 100 separate ghosts that were shot independently, and we did VFX on those. That shot alone is another 36,000 frames. So to handle all of that, if we were just running it through a standard post-process, you modify one element, you change the look on one thing that cuts through the entire piece, you need to push it all out over again. It can take days to render it out. So the Molecule kind of invented their own approach to doing this using layering of the various elements and then pushing them into Adobe Premiere for the final composite. So they were pushing out a background plate, various layers of the crowd up through the foreground, so that if we modified any single element, we only had to push out a new render of that layer. Even that, in some cases, was taking 12 to 24 hours to push out. So just even to handle the size of this, you have to really invent new ways of doing the workflow.
You know, these like giant render farms in data centers. I know that DreamWorks is here at the data center in Las Vegas, and their rendering farm is there. And do we have that kind of rendering farm yet for VR? Is that coming? Is that available?
It kind of depends on where you're starting. If you're a startup, or you're a large VFX house that already has that type of farm that you can, internally try and coordinate with the larger features that are utilizing it to try and, cut off a little chunk for yourself. But I mean, it's slowly getting there. Just from say 2 years ago to now, the render farm capacity is the same. One half is getting things more efficient, whether it's through workflows or technology that allows the current processing power just to run better, so we can cut down on render times, do proxies, different things. And then the other half of it is all the time we're releasing new processors, new storage speeds, and everything that eventually the idea of having a massive render farm versus maybe a smaller one that's just a lot more powerful, especially as we start to shift things towards more GPU based and different things like that. I think it's kind of going to change over the next few years. And the interesting thing about VR is the compute power limitations of VR is actually improving the technology in all the other industries.
Wow.
Because VR requires, we had a shot that was 17 cameras, all at the exact same time, thousands of frames a piece, and we're having to process that all at once for a single shot. And we ended up having to upgrade to a crazy flash SSD rolling server that our artists had fiber cards into, just so they could work in semi-real time, so that way they weren't blindly sending renders to the farm. So just looking at that one shot improved part of the infrastructure and the technology at our studio. So if you go from that aspect, as everybody that's starting to move more and more into VR, and we're handling larger and larger data sets, they're going back to the tech companies that are manufacturing the chips and the GPUs and the servers and saying, I need something that can handle this. And if that technology currently doesn't exist, somebody's gonna, push for it and start upping the game. So I think VR is actually pushing technology across all the industries.
So it makes everything more efficient. And not only that, but VR is crossing multiple verticals. I mean, we're sitting here talking about entertainment, but we haven't talked about medicine. We haven't talked about engineering.
Education.
Education, travel, hands-on training, therapy. I mean, it is literally the industry. So here's the bottom line. You're right in this fact that, now you've got an entire industry continuum in VR that is figuring out how they're going to use VR to make their own industries better. Even, distance diagnosis, medical diagnosis in VR, even that being able to happen. And you've got, we haven't even talked about compute power on the consumer end. So if you don't have the right video card, and now AMD is making cheaper cards, and NVIDIA, there's like quite the competition going on there between those two to get faster and faster and faster. So you've got an industry here across multiple verticals that requires you guys who are hacking, like what Graham was talking about was hacking. We're doing a lot of hacking. We're doing a lot of hacking of cameras. We're doing a lot of hacking on set. You know, it is very much, correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys done traditional 3D for quite a while and traditional film, but this is post-production compute power and everything that's needed right now is, in order to keep ahead of the game, you have to hack.
Oh, wholeheartedly. If you're waiting for somebody else to provide you that perfect solution, you're already behind. Because what's going on is the tech companies that are providing their solutions are relying on the feedback of the people that are pioneering it and coming up with these hacks and then presenting it to them saying, hey, we currently use your technology and it didn't quite do what we wanted. We figured out these workarounds and solutions. If you could integrate this and make it part of your actual technology, that would push everything forward. And so it's the people that are hacking things together and then sharing that information with either other content creators or the tech companies and giving them the feedback saying, you know, if you want us to continue using this stuff, you know, you need to up it to the next level. And so if you're not constantly coming up with these amazing hack solutions, then you're already behind.
So what Graham talked about, basically there was nothing for that. There was nothing for that layering process that would have made it efficient, that wouldn't have like sucked the compute power, slowed you down to a crawl. So now the information that Molecule gathered and the system that because we experienced the same thing, by the way, in sound design, which was Technicolor Sound. Scott Gershon, who designed the sound for My Brother's Keeper, actually developed a new workflow for it to actually make it more efficient and put it together. How are these things, they're sharing with the tech companies, how are these things, does Molecule's process become proprietary and something that they then sell? Or they're not in that business, so then they just share that knowledge? Because everything must become progressively efficient or we get stalled in the water. So this collaboration that you're talking about is incredibly valuable between storytellers and tech companies and post-production companies. What about the hacks that are actually coming up with something that should become a best practice? How is that shared?
I don't have a compelling answer for how it gets shared with other companies. I mean, I think there's a conversation that's happening amongst VFX firms about what these best practices are. What I was trying to explain earlier was, in the case of, this was all developed in the context of our specific project.
Do you have a slide for the workflow?
Yeah,
Did you not tell me? We have an asset, I think, for Graham. So we'll be looking for that, but keep talking while we find it.
So this was a workflow solution because we were delivering this to the New York Times. Each render out was taking days and days. So
this is your trailer.
Yeah, so this is the trailer, but you get a little bit of a feel from it with this. I mean, just this shot alone, this has the background, and then each of those were shot independently on green screen and overlaid back in. There's also a slide later on where you'll literally see about 100 of these different ghosts. So in order to be able to handle that, what we did was to push things out in separate layers so that we could then modify, a little bit of audio coming through, so that we could then modify it layer by layer. So that is a best practice, is obviously something that Molecule is going to incorporate into their future projects. Does that become a tech solution? Does that just become something that's shared within the industry? I don't think there's an answer to it yet.
I think, a lot of times what's great is, at least right now in the community, correct me if I'm wrong, we're all sharing knowledge. A camera company will say, for example, Connor Hare and Alex Meter, they had to build a rig to get less than 5 feet without any distortion and get the intimacy that they wanted. The camera company that we were using for the other camera said, oh, we want to incorporate that in the camera. We want to be able to do that so that you don't have to hack. But when it gets to post-production and processing, you've got all these post-production companies, because we just, actually, full disclosure, we just hired these guys for our next project. Excited about it, happy about it. But the idea, those conversations were, have you done this? Can you do this? This is what we need. Has this been done before? If it hasn't been done before, how do you do it? How fast can we get it?
Yep.
That was it. It reminded me of the old VFX dilemma. More shots, less money. more shots, less money, less time. You know, and that the idea of having solid compute power behind you that actually fosters distance collaboration as well. So you need the connectivity and you need the compute power. So for example, someone will say to us, I just had someone approach me on the floor, we have a stitching farm in India, we have a stitching farm, you know, and that's all well and good.
Live from Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Good morning, everybody. How are we? I'm Janet West, and we're here live, NAB Show Live, here in Las Vegas on day 3 of NAB. Welcome. This morning we're going to be talking about MAM, yes, another acronym, Media Asset Management, but looking at how we're coping with ever-growing volumes of content. Now I'd like to introduce my great guests that I've got today. To my right here I've got Scott Grizzle, who is Manager of Sales Engineering, IBM Cloud Video. Next to him, François Queraille, who is Senior Director, Worldwide Marketing at Aspera, which is also an IBM company. And finally, to the far right, Simon James, who is VP Sales and Engineering for New Lion, which is an MET studio partner. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now, in my sustainability show yesterday, I was talking about the amount of YouTube videos that are being uploaded every 60 seconds, how many Instagram, obviously with live streaming now and blood television over IP, post-production, the storage of data is enormous. François, what are the latest technological innovations that are helping us cope with these ever-growing volumes of content?
So obviously not only is more content being generated, but it's also bigger and bigger. You obviously have 4K television, we going even beyond that, and as you said, the amount of data that's being generated is absolutely gargantuous. And there's a number of challenges. One of them is storage, as you mentioned, and there's tons of different solutions out there, and a lot of it is basically spilling into the cloud, where infinite storage resources are available. What we're seeing from our end, because we are experts in transporting all of this data, is that it is still a challenge to move these gigabytes, petabytes of data over the networks. So some of the technological advancements have to do with the efficient transport of this data between different locations and between locations and cloud platforms.
Okay. Scott, what sort of innovations are there to cope with this gigantuous, I'm going to come back on the infinite volumes, but the gigantuous amounts of data for storage?
Well, with the amount of data out there, the biggest thing is you had to make it searchable. You had to have like with Watson, we're launching out something called cognitive information, where you can put more tags on there, more information. Because with so much information, do you want black data where you have no idea what it is, or do you want informed data where you can pull from it and you can hot transfers and things like that? The great thing about Aspera is with all this much data information out there, you can actually have the hot content being pulled from storage and being delivered. While your cold content, which you still want to have, you want to have the information on, but it's not exactly needed. But then obviously you have lead for it, you can pull it from there. So with the cognitive information, you can actually put the tags on there, you can do more information research and pull things out there and make it a usable variety of content with a connection for delivery.
Mm-hmm. Your comment on infinite, François, I saw some data a couple of years ago that in 2015 that there were about 4.4 zettabytes of data in the digital universe. They reckon 2019, 2020 there'll be 44 zettabytes. This is ridiculous as far as an exponential growth. Do we really have infinite capability for storage?
So everything is finite. I'm in marketing, so forgive the slightly too enthusiastic comment.
Yes.
However, you do have absolutely massive repositories of storage that are now being created all over the world.
Okay.
IBM has been investing massive amounts of capital into creating storage for cloud services, and so are all the other cloud providers. So it's not infinite. There's a ton of it.
Yeah. Scott brought up the fact of, obviously, with so much trying to find it. Simon, what about video cataloging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Scott. The real key thing with managing all of this this data and all of this media is the metadata for us, and what we can do with that with our partners. And the real challenge for certainly partners we work with is how you then surface all of that content, help people find it, help our partners monetize it, and create an experience around it that is relevant to them. And to Scott's point, that comes from the metadata that we manage within our content management system, and also combining that metadata with tools to personalize the experience from the end user's point of view to find all of that content and find content that's relevant to their preferences, which keeps them staying in the service and viewing more and more content, which is really what our partners are looking to do with their services.
Yeah, we've talked about obviously the data going on the cloud, and we all know it's not some ethereal little thing up in the sky, it's huge data centers. But does local storage still play a role in media companies' asset management workflows? Or should everything go on the cloud?
Well, obviously, we're cloud-based. I always say yes. But yes, there are times and places for local storage. When you want to do quick editing, quick pull down, the whole concept of store and forward is a very easy way to get video around. But at the same time, you want to have your major repository be a place that's more secure, where you can have things. We also have backups. How many times you have local storage and it fell on you, and you have a drive crash on you? Well, at least with the cloud storage, you have backups and you have a primary systems. So there are times of latency. You might want to have a quick little local cache while your main storage is up in the cloud where you can pull down from and other information.
What do you feel about local storage versus cloud?
So,
do you need to have both?
Well, companies always need both. Some media companies are a little bit more adventurous and move all of their workflows into the cloud. Some of them keep a hybrid model. I think the key really is about access. So as long as access is practical, then it doesn't really matter where your content is. And when you have all of these amazing cloud providers out there that have significantly upped their performance and reliability, combined with technologies that allow you to access your content wherever it is, then it's down to the user to really define what is most appropriate as far as location is concerned.
Yeah. Okay. Simon, any comment on that?
Yeah. We host all of our platform in our New Line managed cloud. We work with companies like Aspera to bring huge volumes of content on behalf of our partners into their service and surface that. I think that to Francois's point, making that content available to the user is what matters to us. So we will serve that content through multiple CDNs, and having that origin storage, connected in an efficient way to those CDN partners that we work with is what enables that experience to be absolutely top notch for the end user.
Yeah, Scott, live stream video. What does it take from a technology standpoint to best leverage live stream video?
So with live video, obviously you need to have the encoder to fast, low latency input in, where you can process and deliver. Then you also have a lot of companies who take the VODs to live. Again, that's where you need to have the MAM system or a content management system where you can organize things, make it a live playlist, and go file to live. So you need to do both, but also be able to record, auto archive all live content where you can use that content for later on. That's what. Which a lot of things we do. That's something that Aspera does also. They have that information out there. They can transfer videos fast, secure, and offer the overall. Because really, you think about online video, it's the future of TV. People are so used to having stuff instantaneous, high quality, and things like that. And you can't go like the old days. Oh, it's only for the web. Not anymore. If it looks like crap on the web, it's not acceptable. It has to be great looking for long term. And that's what the whole thing is: low latency and high quality and fast delivery.
Yeah. Any comment on live?
Absolutely. As you said, now consumers are absolutely used to having instant access to extremely high resolution video. I have kids, and when the Netflix spinning wheel happens, they don't understand. They don't even compute. Like, no, I want to watch the content. So all of the back end, all of these technologies that are put in place in order to provide that experience to the consumer are extremely important. You were talking about VOD type scenario for streaming, and now you look also at live streaming. People expect that same level of quality for a live stream, and that poses a lot of different challenges and cost. One of them is if you're watching a sporting event that's being broadcast live, there's very likely a huge truck outside a venue and a satellite involved, and then it goes to a broadcast center, and then it maybe goes to a CDN for delivery to folks. There are companies out there, including us, who are trying to change that, because there's definitely an opportunity to replace all of that very expensive and inflexible infrastructure with just using a simple commodity internet connection. And I think that's one of the things we're going to see in the near future, is more people adopting that and making very high quality live event streaming a possibility.
Mm-hmm. So for a company that's deciding to go from local storage, or they've got a little bit on the cloud but they want to move on the cloud, what are the challenges for them to, we talked about metadata and cataloging, but what are the real challenges that companies are having, and you guys obviously as providers, to make it easy and also bring up security, which is a big issue? So what are the challenges, Scott?
Well, obviously, normal encryption around at a high level for storage and that kind of stuff. But one thing we're trying to show at the show is how you can use more AI, cognitive learning, to add to the metadata, but pull from that metadata and create more information to pull with from. So you can do similar shots. And it shouldn't always have to be a manual process for someone to go through, put tags in. You should have to have a way to go through, tag videos. We can make it go on here, add additional shots, separate segments so you can actually see and what are similar segments, so that when your editors are working on things, they know they can pull from. Or if you have a producer or a highlight reel, say, hey, a great shot here, but take out camera 2 instead, pull this one up, here's a different angle of the exact same shot, it's great for a highlight reel. It's a little better shot. That kind of information you can do for pulling down for either live or VOD. It gives you a chance for a second screen. It also gives you a chance for just enrichment content around the world everybody wants. Again, like we're talking about, people want that cool, interesting content, and that's the whole thing we want to have. We all are into the future of TV. We are all the old saying is content is king. Well, how do you get that content out there? How do you make rich, valuable content people want and can be used? And one thing is, content for one person might be interesting, but another content, the exact same stuff, different angle, different shot, might be interesting for everybody else. So more options you have for the viewers, and also in many cases let the viewers decide what they want to watch.
Yeah. And Simon, what are the challenges, particularly for the end user?
So I think one of the, to back up to, pick up from that point, the challenge that I think our partners face with these huge catalogs of content are around, obviously managing that content and then monetizing it. So coming up with ways of creating packages that obviously appeal to users to attract them into the service and get them to continue using that service. A good example, I think, is something that the Tennis Channel do on our platform. If you go to their service now, they've got a Serena channel, it's been in the news because of her pregnancy. They've got a Sharapova channel, and they are live streaming channels that they've managed to put together very quickly using our asset management system. From the end user's perspective, I think I've already touched on this, but the challenge of finding that content, and that's obviously down to a very strong recommendations engine. We put a lot of focus on giving our users tools to manage their preferences in terms of sports personalities they like, such as a fighter on the UFC service, whether they're into documentaries or live events, and all of that then informs the recommendations that they're presented with in on whatever device they're watching.
Mm-hmm. And Francois, what do you see as the challenges?
So I'm probably a little biased on this because that's a problem we address. I do think that taking your asset management to the cloud, the first obstacle you're going to face is ingest of your content and getting it into the cloud. Cloud infrastructure is by definition remote, and you're facing challenges of moving very vast amounts of data over digital networks, and that's where you need something efficient to do that. Then you'll want to maybe migrate your content from one cloud to the next. How do you do that? Some folks have interesting solutions for that. I've seen some providers have actually told their customers that they can ship a drive, or they're going to give them a box, so they put all of their content on there, then put it on a truck, and then take it to the cloud. That's not an efficient solution to, as you said, one of the challenges is monetizing as well.
Yeah.
And time to market. If you don't seize that opportunity, and if you're not able to really get your content up there, prepare it, tag it, and then distribute it to your consumers, you're missing out on significant opportunity.
Yeah. So, NAB 2017, what exciting things are we going to see from you guys at the show here?
At our booth, we have the full Watson demos where you see, again, how you can manipulate data, manipulate the content for more interest, and do that stuff. Plus, you overall delivery, the new ways of delivering to all devices, and again, with that enriched content. So that's what we're showing at our booth.
Okay, Francois.
We have so many things going on. Lots of cloud-related things. So we actually introducing a new service to move your data to the cloud. And then we're doing interesting live streaming things like I mentioned earlier.
Okay, and very briefly, Simon, what on the New Line stand?
We're showcasing our new ACE Analytics tool. It actually enables you to measure all of the key usage metrics around your service, so you can see how people are consuming all of that vast library of content and measure that.
We've run out of time, guys. This has been really interesting. Thank you so much. I'm Janet West, and I'd like to thank very much Simon James, Francois Queret, and Scott Grizzle. Stay with me after the break. I'm back with, are we dealing with technology that's making it impossible to do standards? Stay safe in Vegas. See you later.
Hello and welcome to NAB Show Live. I'm your host, Ryan Salazar, and we have a very special guest today. We're talking about cyclorama walls, cyc walls. So, Todd Dean, how you doing, sir? Nice to chat with you. So, a lot of photographers, videographers, educational institutions, they want to shoot in front of a wall. So a black wall, a white wall, gray wall, whatever, for photography or video. And I hear it's been used in animation as well, too. So talk about what a cyclorama wall is.
Well, a cyclorama wall is basically you curve every 90-degree corner in a room, or as much as you want to shoot in front of, so that there's no beginning of the floor and start of the wall. It's like one big curved situation. So in a cyclorama or a cyc wall, it's kind of like infinity.
Okay, so how do you build something like that?
Well, they used to build it by hand, and they would cut these ribs out of plywood, and they would try to bend boards, and the radiuses were always really large because that was the easiest way to bend that board. Today, there's many companies like mine that create prefab situations that you buy and you put into that room.
When you build a cyc wall, do you really need a cyc? I guess that's the radius. Could you just shoot in front of a white wall, for example?
Sure, they could shoot against the wall, but basically what happens if you shoot below the knee, you'll see the corner of the room, or if you shoot a big wide shot, you would see the vertical corner of the room. And so you either want a one-wall cyc where you're just going to curve out the floor, or a two-wall cyc where you curve out the floor and the vertical corner, and then there's a cornerstone in the middle that connects all those units together.
Okay, so to build something like this, does it take a long time? Is it very difficult?
To build the old-fashioned way, yes, and they're hollow and they're very easy to damage, whereas products like I sell are solid polystyrene products, and you just glue them in instantly, and then you spackle the seams, and you can have a cyc in a day or so.
Okay, so you're saying you don't have to make the physical, I guess I call it the arch, I guess, right?
It's the radius, and there are several sizes of radiuses. We actually sell those 2-foot radiuses the most often now. Back long ago, when you actually had to build it, you built these large radiuses. It took up a lot of floor space, so you don't have to do that now.
What kind of supplies does that take, I guess?
Well, basically, we sell you the piece that you're going to glue in. You're just going to go out and buy the glue and the spackle. A lot of times people just get a drywall person to come do their spackling because it's really quick and easy. But that's really it.
All right, excellent. Again, Todd Dean with Affordable Cyc Wall Systems. Do you have a website we can share?
Yes, it's affordablecycwall.com. and basically just look me up, give me a call, and we can talk.
All right, again, Todd Dean, Affordable Cycle Wall Systems. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Ryan Saddles here with NAB Show Live. We have a very special guest right now, America Ferrera. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Trying to keep my voice here in Vegas. So congratulations. You just got the Television Chairman's Award at NAB Show today.
That's right.
So how does that feel?
It feels great. It's an incredible honor to be recognized by the Association of Broadcasters, and you know, to be honored specifically for the representation that the work I've been lucky enough to do has created in the industry.
All right. So Ugly Betty, that was an awesome show. That's when I first learned of you. You've got to be proud of that. But now you're working on another show.
Yes.
And it's your baby.
Well, kind of well, kind of. It was my infant. It was someone else's baby. Justin Spitzer, who worked on The Office for 6 years, created this wonderful show, and it's about, everyday people working at a Cloud9, insert Walmart, Target, and in kind of big box store. And it's just about people from all walks of life, coexisting, and there's so much room for humor, but also for smart, poignant commentary. Not necessarily, there's not necessarily a message so much as it is so many people's different perspectives on any given issue, and mining that for the humor.
And so I hear that you're really big on women's issues and Hispanic issues. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you.
And so you're very involved with the community.
I've been involved with a number of communities, and I'm really big on just like people. I'm big on people being represented and having a voice and feeling empowered, and I've done work with women people and with Latino people and all other kinds of people.
All right, excellent. All right, America Ferrera, the one, the only, right here in a hidden location at NAB Show. We'll get back to the studio.
Live from Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're here at NAB on day 3, 2017 at the Las Vegas Convention Center. I'm Janet West, and this morning we're going to talk about, is technology moving too fast to develop standards? And I have 3 very interesting guests with me. First, to my right, I've got Matthew Goldman, who is Senior VP Technology, Media and Television, and is also President of SMPTE. And next to him, Andy Rayner, who is Marketing Director of Nevion. And then next to him, I have Dean Stonebeck, who is Senior Director of Engineering and Standards. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay. Has formal standardization become a dinosaur with the way technology's been moving?
I don't think it's a black and white answer for that. Just like in most things we do in the industry, it's not black and white.
Yeah.
But however, there is a lot of very fast development with the new DevOps model and agile development, where you need to respond more quickly to the needs. So there is a need to get some, in a particular like a software incubator, there is a need to be able to move a bit more quickly than in the past. But the benefits that you get from formal standardization, which is of course is fantastic interoperability and economies of scale, are still very relevant even in today's age. For instance, in the North Hall, there's something known as the IP Showcase, which is showcasing the new SMPTE draft standards, suite of standards known as 2110, which is to handle the broadcaster migration to IT infrastructure, aka all IP, right? And there's 40 vendors that are interoperating in that stand, and something that is relatively brand new. And it started as an idea that came from some of the forums, but it has gone through formal standardization in the Society of Motion Pictures and Television Engineers, because we want that interoperability. It's too important for a business that is 24/7 and online all the time. It doesn't mean to say that we have 3 years to develop standards for the old process if you're going to sit around and argue about things, but there is a case to be made to still have formal standardization.
Okay.
And I think the 2110 is a good example of two things. First of all, I think the actual SMPTE process has actually been pretty fast, and that's because there's been a real willingness across the industry to make it happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's also been good because there's been a pipelining from Video Services Forum, and where some of that work had been previously done in a pretty agile way. So there was a good amount of pre-work had happened. So actually, as it came into the SMPTE process, it was already pretty well formulated, and that's actually helped to make it a relatively speedy way through the process. But absolutely agree, it needs to be defined very, very well, because there has to be no room for ambiguity, or very little room for ambiguity in the way we things end up.
So if it's speeding up, does that mean perhaps we might not be doing the right thing? We have not taken time to think it out, or?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think there is an agility. I think people are used to working in a more software environment,
Yep.
in a much more flexible and agile way, and I think there is due process still happening. I can assure you of that from some of the meetings. Due process is still happening, so I think there's the appropriate level of rigor is still happening, but we are managing to make that more agile.
So to kind of continue on that statement, I really think that Andy has hit the point here. It's the way that you get more agile, do it quickly, is to get some sort of an industry consensus together. Now, consensus does not mean unanimity. It just means a supermajority of the people involved have a desire to move forward in a particular direction. And as Andy said, it's the combination of these industry forums working along with a due process standards body that can actually speed the development for that. As was mentioned, there was an input document brought into the SMPTE in order to be able to move forward with 2110. It was relatively well done by the Video Services Forum in this particular case, but there's still, as was discovered when you go through due process, there's a whole bunch of things you discovered, aha, this isn't working right, or that's not working right. But by having that consortium of interested people already put together and having a place to do interoperability testing and things like that, it really does help foster the more rapid standards development.
Yeah. So Dean, a dinosaur or something that's vital to the industry?
So I agree with what my colleague said. It is still vital to the industry. As we move into more agile development, as both these gentlemen said, things will get developed more quickly. So there's still the need, though, to put things into standards maybe at the end. So in the traditional environment, we used to develop a specification or a standard first, and then we go make the code. In today's agile processes, we find that more and more people are developing the software and doing the testing, and even if it's open source, people can be putting code into the code base, and that can be a very quick dynamic environment. And it's essentially pre-tested as this happens. But at some point, these like video program assets will have a long lifetime, and they need to be codified in some kind of a permanent standard environment. So I think that it's a mixture of both. Maybe some things that used to get standardized first won't be anymore, but there will still be a need for standards at some point in the process in order to lock down a solution.
So for people in the audience and viewing at home who are interested in how standards are developed, is it generally the organizations like SMPTE or EBU or whoever, or is it companies suddenly say, hey, this isn't working because we've absolutely got to have something that everyone can work together with?
It's actually a combination of both, but what's interesting about this is we form a lot more of what we call trade association or industry groups. Think of it as birds of a feather flock together type of a thing, where you all get together with a common interest. Now, it was, if you go back 20 years, perhaps the only way that was really done was through a formal standardization body. Today, it's a combination of with people with a common commercial need. Even competitors in the same market will come together to hash out and resolve commercial needs, because the old expression, a high tide floats all boats. It's the same thing when you have this. But it really is the interaction between the commercial side of it and the industry along with formal standardization. To talk about the benefit of agile development, as we were saying before, you don't have 3 to 4 years to do a standard now. You have to do it at a much rapid pace. So what do? We do this type of development that Dean had just mentioned. We have a software incubator, for instance, or a group of people getting together on a regular basis to sit down, write some code across it, and test a few things out, maybe get a few interfaces done. That's the benefit of having the agile development. The bane of having that is eventually, you need to stop. Otherwise, you'll just be fiddling with it forever. You won't have any interoperability, and that's where the due process rigor comes into play. Now, that said, it doesn't necessarily lock a standard down for all time. There's an amendment process that every standards body has, where then you can expand it to the future to add new features and functions. And as a matter of fact, most of the standards we're developing today have built-in expansion capabilities. You try to think forward. This is the way we're doing it now. What if we need to do something different or change the future? You add an escape bits or a clause or some type of a mechanism that allows you to grow it moving forward as well.
And I think the forward-looking nature of that, an example with 2110 is some of this stuff is still in its infancy. So we're making some calls and we're trying to be as absolutely all-encompassing as we can. But we're very aware that in a revision in 2 years' time, we may well need to say, actually, okay, lessons learnt. That we need to add these in, or we need to actually recalculate these things here. So I think the consensus of getting the requirements together has been a very good one. And there are several bodies now where we're actually saying on a regular heartbeat basis, what do we need to actually work on standards wise.
Actually, you bring up a really good point. Something that SMPTE has added new into what would be considered perhaps, we were 100 years old last year, so we've been doing motion pictures and in television standards. There wasn't even a television back 100 years ago, but that was added in later. But one thing that's new in the process of that, and I believe Dean will say this, the SCTE is doing the same thing. We have an automatic 1-year review now. It used to be like you'd have 5-year reviews. In the SMPTE, we have an automatic 1-year review where you take a look at where are we standing now? How are we doing in the industry? Are there any changes? So there's no doubt that if you go back and you look at maybe we need to do some tweaking or something we knew. It just gets it put. It's a way of moving things forward faster.
So standards have got to evolve these days because the way
we're evolving just like everything else.
Yeah,
right?
This industry, it's amazing at the moment, and we've got obviously the push to very much IP and software related versus being hardware related. We've also got a lot of little companies writing software. Is it easy to get all the little guys on board?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
And I think the whole agility of software development as opposed to traditional hardware development means that these guys can come in and very, very quickly get up to speed and produce amazing stuff. I think some of the other emerging standards at the moment, it's literally things are being iterated over a period of hours in terms of working out what works, what needs to be changed, and some of the interops that are software based that have been happening over the last 18 months. Yeah, the agility has been phenomenal to actually see that thing evolve.
Yeah. Matthew pointed out, Dean, that it's possible now, you were saying 2 years to create a standard. What are we talking about? We're getting standards quicker, but how quickly can standards be?
That's a great question. There's nothing about the standards process that needs to be slow. Traditionally, people view a standards process as slow, and some of the huge international organizations still have a fairly lengthy process. But for instance, I'm with SCTE. It's an ANSI accredited standards organization, just like SMPTE is.
Yep.
And so when you're following the due process, you have to have rules in place for determining consensus. But in particular for our organization, once you believe you have consensus, you go out for a ballot. It's a 2-week ballot, and it can be done. So you need to give enough time for people to read it. Some of these documents can be 100 pages long. So, I think it's unrealistic to say faster than 2 weeks. But as fast as you can write a document, you can be done. And to be clear, to your previous question, as far as the little guys getting in, if you're an ANSI developer, you have to let anybody into the process. It's a consensus body. Organizations might have a fee structure for participating, but money can't be an impediment to getting in. That's part of the ANSI rules. So the little guys can get in just like the big guys and can participate in the process, just like they can in an open source development for software. They can participate in the standards development just as easily.
Yeah, to add to that, it's actually the process of being due process itself that equalizes the voices amongst the big or larger size corporations that would participate in an individual contributor. Everybody at a standards body is an individual contributor. So it really comes down to, are you going to invest the resources on it? And it doesn't matter if your company is worth $100 billion or $100. If you're investing the resources into the standards development, you have an equal voice at the table.
I think the speed and agility is also being more and more driven by everyone because time is precious. So actually, I mean, you look at some of these standards calls that we have, on a weekly basis, and you think of the brain power that's been out there over a 1 or 2 hour meeting, and you think, actually, that's an incredible value in the industry that's being expended here. So I think that expedites the need to actually do it fast and do it as reasonably quickly as possible, just because of the sheer amount of expertise and cost that you're actually incurring collectively.
Is there enough collaboration between the different standards organizations?
Well, we always would like to have more. You mean between the different standards development organization, industry firms? We always would like to see more, but we are seeing a lot more of that now. There's a liaison process, which is between these organizations where they share stuff. And even if you don't have a formal liaison, there's nothing stopping you from writing to the organization saying you have an idea you'd like to bring into it, and you can be an invited guest for that. One of the things that's interesting is the leadership in over a dozen of these standards development organizations actually get together at every major trade show. We call it the Inter-SDO meeting, and our meeting is tomorrow morning here, where we actually have the heads of the larger industry forums and standards organizations all getting together to talk amongst each other. We have a schedule for it. It's not a formal group, it's all ad hoc, but it does allow us to exchange ideas and things that are of common interest amongst us.
Okay.
Yeah, totally agree. The formal liaison process is an excellent way to get things in writing between the various organizations. But what makes things so fast is when participants are in multiple organizations.
Yeah.
So we have people coming to our meetings all the time that are members of CTA or SMPTE, and the opposite happens as well. So companies, participants that are involved in multiple organizations, because each of these organizations has a certain place in the industry, that cooperation makes things go quickly, and things will go as fast as it is important. If it's important to the industry, then people will do their homework and they'll come to the meeting that might only be a week away with a ton of information. And if it's not important, then the standard will take 3 years.
Okay.
And there's quite a lot of meshing. I mean, between VSF, AIMS, AMWA, SMPTE, which are the ones that I'm involved in, we're actually seeing there's a lot of common people involved, and there's an awful lot of sharing of information in a very positive way, which I think is helping to expedite things.
So is there a need to consolidate the groups then?
Well, each group has its own focus, and you have seen some consolidation over the time with different groups as time goes on. It ebbs and flows as a topic matter would come to it. But to add to what was just said, one of the differences I think today more than what it was 30 years ago was the industry forums coming in to provide commercial context to what a technical standards organization does. And as was mentioned earlier, everybody up here, we all participate. I personally participate in over a half a dozen different standards organizations or industry forums. And it can be overwhelming at times, laughing about the weekly meetings because there's too many meetings. But you have to pick and choose what is of your interest to you, and hopefully there's a critical mass that will move the standard forward.
So with the way the industry is moving, what standards are really difficult to develop when you've got, if you like, a moving technology? VR, for example, AR, we've got AI.
I don't think it's the technology that's usually difficult from the point of view of standards or even specifications. It's when companies have different objectives. Okay. So that's why we've used the word consensus body several times. But as you know, there could be multiple consortia that get formed. VHS and Betamax years ago is an example, right? So different companies form together and have different goals and objectives. And whether that's an agile open source software development area or a standards area, you still need to drive to consensus. In the software area, you could have multiple forks go out in your software and they might never reconverge. And in the standards area, you could have multiple standards trying to accomplish the same thing. So in the industry, what you really want is a way to have that communication and hopefully ultimately get the companies together into one solution.
So along that line, there is a big challenge that I believe the standards organizations are facing today, and that is a changing climate of how you do and how you approach standardization. as was always referred to, the raison d'etre for having standardization is to foster interoperability so that everybody benefits. And when I mean everybody, the people that are providing equipment, but also the users of that equipment as well, because you get economies of scale if you have commonality. And one of the things we've seen a little bit, maybe this is a little bit politically incorrect to say, was this belief that's sort of like you're hearing about in schools where everybody who participates gets a trophy. That is the antithesis of a successful standard. If you have 5 different ways of doing things, there seems to be some level of expectation now from some participants that just bringing a technology into a standards body justifies it becoming standardized.
Yeah.
And it's something that Ericsson follows in particular, but a lot of companies that are traditional in due process. For the success of standardization, the best way forward is for everybody to do it in a common way. So basically we call that one tool for one function. And we're having some challenges today in a few areas where there's a lot of really good technology out there that are very similar in performances. For instance, I'll throw one out at you, and that is high dynamic range right now.
Yep.
There is well over a dozen different ways of doing it. That is just not benefiting the industry at all. We just had some recent announcements this week over yet another one that's being done. And the point of standardization is that, can we all come to agree with it? I can tell you, since I've been doing standards for almost 30 years now, being very involved in the early days of MPEG, that there was always competing technologies in there. We did verification tests to figure out what the best tool was for the function, and then you pick that one, you congratulate the winner, and the losers just provided more technology next time. They tried again. Now there seems to be a lot of more politics involved in it, where there's a little bit of a complication now because everybody wants their mechanism in, whether or not the end goal is the best thing for the industry. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face right now in all due process bodies for doing that.
And I think we do need to get in, when there are new requirements, where there is obvious needs for standardization and compatibility, we need to get in quite early on, because otherwise proprietary solutions become taken up and can start to dominate, and it becomes much harder then to actually develop an open industry standard. So it's important for us to actually work and get in early on the curve in technology requirements.
In a couple of the sessions I've run, they've actually said that not every broadcaster or post house or whatever has kept up with the way technology is going. They're playing catch up more than actually jumping on board. If new standards are developed, does this possibly give them a problem to continue operating? And what help do the standards industry, the standards organizations give these sort of slow starters, if you like?
Right. It's actually a benefit because you're trying to get consensus around one mechanism. I know that we've repeatedly referred to this today only because it's just such a massive undertaking in the IP showcase that's happening in the North Hall here with 40 vendors interoperating, including competitors in the market, to show that interoperability is better for everyone in doing that. So having standardization actually helps the studios catch up, because which direction do I go in? I have a dozen different ways of doing that. By having standardization, you're able to go one way forward. And we're referring to this because that's what we did with the Joint Task Force from Network Media, which consists of the Advanced Workflow Association, the European Broadcasting Union, the Society of Motion Pictures and Television Engineers, and the Video Services Forum, forming that as a foundation of a roadmap in this area. And then we have a new organization we formed as basically a way to drive towards common standardization called AIMS, which is the Alliance of IP Media Associations. So it's really a way to move the industry forward and try to foster and nudge people along having a common solution.
And I think the fact that most of the standards now, the implementations are very software based, which means that actually if the standards are evolved, actually most manufacturers have got the ability to actually allow customers to migrate without needing very costly hardware change outs, things like that. And that's a very big change. So the agility of the upgrade process for the end user is actually is a much more straightforward and less costly one now.
Dean, what do you think about that?
Well, so the example Matthew brought up, I wasn't going to go on HDR. It's a big issue right now, but it's an excellent example. Can we imagine a world where if there wasn't ultimately a standard? There's going to be billions of TVs ultimately doing HDR one way or another. Hopefully not 10 ways. Hopefully one way or another, literally someday. 20 years ago, that's why the organization I'm with started the standards program. 20 years ago was digital ad insertion or ad insertion. it wasn't digital yet, was all over the place. There was so many different ways to do it, and we were started by the cable operators because it was a mess. It was a nightmare, absolutely uncontrollable. And now our ad insertion standard is used virtually around the world as the way to put the Q tones in for commercials. Now, we hate commercials, but advertising is what makes the world go round. So it's just a success story there, and we will ultimately get to a story like that with HDR and other technologies. But to take it to the top level, our standards still needed. Yes, they are needed because in a worldwide market, you need one way of doing things, certain key fundamental aspects.
Yeah.
Need a primary way of doing it.
I'm going to throw in a curveball here. Do we need to start making standards for sustainability in this industry?
Well,
oh, silence, guys.
I didn't quite hear the question. Sorry. What was
So,
it about?
Do we need to develop standards for sustainability?
Actually, that's one thing I think is a program I think the SCTE has.
Yeah, we have a big effort
the
on
energy, the Energy 2020 program. So it's already has been begun in some areas.
Yeah.
I think that's also driven by end users, because most end user requirements now are looking to make things more environmentally friendly, lower power. There are many drivers that come in almost, if you like, from a commercial perspective to actually make the industry consider how to do things in a more sustainable way. And the fact again that software-based solutions means you haven't got to refresh hardware. You can actually do multiple iterations of functionality on a common platform. I think that's also helping that area almost by the commercial drivers and the way the technology is emerging, as well as the sort of sustainable input.
But from obviously we're dealing with software most of the time, as you pointed out, but we still do make hardware.
Right.
So perhaps standards for design for the environment to make things
Well, that's
more
what I mean. That's what we're already
recyclable
starting
and
to see now.
remanufacturable.
An example of that already happening, of course, is the Energy Star program in the U.S., and they have a similar thing in Europe as well. And that's by being driven by another association, the Consumer Technology Association, as well. So those do already exist. Going back to the software model, well, of course we're still going to have hardware because the software has to run on something anyways.
Yep.
But the concept of we need things faster is because it started first in the networking side of the business and in the IT side, but we had software-defined networking or network function virtualization. The concept being that you can define things in terms of their function and flows, code them, and have them running on a generic engine. That is now moving. That's the whole point behind the new SMPTE standard 2110 and the AMWA ISL4 and a few other things for this. All IP future is now the broadcasting industry wants to take advantage of leveraging the much wider industry market for IT infrastructure to drive the economies of scale for that as well. And so now we have software-defined media processing or media processing function virtualization. It's an evolution of the way that we're doing things.
Guys, we've run out of time. This has been really interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you, the audience here. Join me this afternoon at 2:15 for Thinking Spherically. Let's talk about being in a 360 world. I'm Janet West. See you at 2:15. Stay safe.
Hey, what's going on? Jamie Alexander here with Broadcast Beat. We're at the NAB Show 2017, and I'm here with Michael Fay at the Akamai booth. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks a lot.
Did I say that right? Akamai?
That's right, Jamie. It's Akamai Technologies, and Akamai in Hawaiian is synonymous with innovation. That's where the name comes from.
Oh, I love that. Well, we love the Hawaiian thing. I was actually born in Hawaii, so that's amazing.
Fascinating. Well, Akamai was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, from a whole bunch of engineers from MIT.
Oh, wow. I love it. And you guys have been around for a little while, I would say. How long have you guys been in business?
We've been in business a little over 17 years. And what we're best known for is our ability to be a content delivery network. So people upload content onto our network, and we use hundreds of thousands of servers to distribute it around the world. And we continue to evolve that platform.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So tell me what you guys have here at NAB and what you're showcasing that's new.
All right, so what we're showcasing that's new that I think is incredibly relevant, so we're seeing this huge shift in the OTT market. So people taking traditional content and moving it online. So some of the things that we're solving is obviously high quality of video, whether we're preparing for 4K or 8K. Another thing that we're doing is the latency between Let me give you an example. You're watching the big game, and you hear people cheering down the hall, but you're watching it on your mobile device, and you're 30, 50, 90 seconds behind.
Right.
We've been able to solve that problem where we can line up in synchronous with television broadcast. So everybody's getting the same experience, whether you're on traditional cable or broadcast. Another thing that we're doing is we came up with an entire operations model for our broadcast customers so that what they're currently used to with these heavy 5, 6, 9 SLA, like always up, we can align with IP delivery. So we're really excited about that at the show.
Oh yeah, it's all about IP delivery. Thank you so much for what you do in broadcast. We definitely appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what is your favorite part of working with Akamai? Tell me something about the brand culture, one of your favorite products that you offer that just makes your clients ecstatic to work with you.
I'll tell you, we have a lot of customers that work with Akamai for one key reason. We have some of the smartest, most talented internet engineers that grace the planet. I mean, Akamai is an academic culture. We're really interested in solving our customers' problems. You know, we don't necessarily inherit problems from the past, and we overcome problems. So culturally, we have so many guys that come in with PhDs and handle these large problems of really changing industries. We've succeeded in changing the content delivery industry, we're changing the security industry, we're changing the web industry, and we are changing the OTT and video industry.
That is so amazing, and I love the confidence. That's beautiful. So is there anything else about Akamai that we need to know that maybe we didn't cover and that we would love people to know so they can check you out?
You know, I'll tell you, some of the things that are coming up in the industry are really exciting. VR, augmented reality, seeing a lot of it. Like I mentioned before, 4K and 8K getting more and more popular. As we build up to the 2020 Olympics, we're going to see a ton of 8K, which everyone needs to start getting ready for. I think we're really excited about tomorrow's technology. We know that everything is going to move from traditional broadcast to online, and Akamai's ready for it.
I love that, and I was going to ask you about the future because I feel like it's not even been that long before 4K was like, I mean, we loved it, but now 4K, HDR, everything is like a must-have. So to be prepared for 8K, you guys are definitely ahead of the game.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people talk about 4K and 8K, and we do. But another thing that's interesting is think of those subscribers, the millennials who are on really bad internet connections, and how we can actually help them get the lower bit rates, more subscribers for our customers. That's incredibly differentiating. So not only can we help out on the top for the 4K and 8K, but we can also help out on those 1 megabit streams just to get people watching content like NBC Sports or Turner or ESPN or some of our international customers. They're really grateful to be able to get the bottom bit rates as much as the top.
Yes, no, I agree completely. It makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And where can we find you guys online?
www.akamai.com, AKAMAI.
Done and done. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.